It was a crisp November morning when Sergeant David Tran kissed his wife Tao goodbye at the front door and tousled the golden curls of his 3-year-old daughter Lily. The routine was familiar, comforting, just another day in the life of a decorated officer and family man. As he whistled for his loyal canine partner, Shadow, a broad-chested German shepherd with intelligent eyes, no one in that quiet suburban kitchen could have imagined it would be the last time they'd see David alive. By afternoon, everything had unraveled. A high-speed pursuit of suspected drug traffickers spiraled out of control across county lines. David's patrol vehicle was forced off the road and into a ravine. In the wreckage, Shadow survived with only minor injuries, protected in the rear compartment. But David had thrown himself over a rookie deputy to shield him from gunfire. He died on the scene, a hero in the line of duty. News of his death rippled through the community like a shockwave, but its most devastating impact was felt in the small, trembling frame of Lily Tran. She was too young to fully understand death, but she knew absence. Her father never came home that night. His boots never echoed in the hallway again. And the house, once filled with laughter and the rhythmic thump of Shadow's tail, grew unbearably quiet. Something in Lily shut down that day. At first, she only whispered, then only to her mother. Eventually, silence consumed her entirely. Doctor reports named it selective mutism, a trauma response. But no clinical term could describe the hollow, haunted look in her eyes or the way she clutched her father's badge like it held her broken world together. Only Shadow could reach her. The same dog who had once chased suspects through back alleys now sat calmly by Lily's side, his soulful eyes reflecting her pain. During their weekly supervised visits, Lily would kneel beside him, pressing her face into his fur, lips moving in quiet whispers no one else could hear. It was the only time she spoke. 5 years passed like this, time frozen for a little girl who had lost her voice the day her father gave his life. And in those silent moments shared with Shadow, the last living link to her father, she found the only place where her grief could breathe. 5 years had passed since the day Sergeant David Tran was laid to rest with full honors, yet the wound he left behind in his daughter's heart never closed. Little Lily Tran, once a spirited child with bright eyes and an endless stream of questions, had grown into a quiet, solemn 7-year-old. The silence that took hold of her on the day of her father's death had never lifted. She didn't speak at school, not to friends, not even to her stepfather, Richard. Only one living soul still heard her voice: Shadow. Every Wednesday afternoon, Tao Tran would drive her daughter to the county K-9 facility, where Shadow, now retired from active duty, was kept in a secured enclosure. These visits had become sacred, the only moments where Lily showed signs of being a child again. As soon as she saw the dog, her shoulders relaxed. Her tight-lipped expression would soften, and she'd kneel beside him, her small hands resting gently on his thick coat. And then, like clockwork, her lips would begin to move, silent whispers, confessions, maybe even conversations, spoken only to him. Shadow, for his part, was no longer the same hardened K-9 officer. He had aged. Yes, but more than that, he had grieved. After David's death, handlers reported the once vigilant dog had fallen into a quiet depression, refusing food, uninterested in training, and spending long hours sitting by the gate as if waiting for a command that would never come. But when Lily was near, something stirred in him. His posture straightened, his ears twitched with alertness, his tail thumped the floor in steady rhythm. They were, in every sense, each other's sanctuary. For Lily, Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was the final thread to the life she had before the world turned cruel. Her father's scent still lingered in his fur. His training was David's legacy made flesh and bone, and every whispered word was a step closer to the father she longed to speak to one last time. But now, that fragile connection was under threat. News came that Shadow, due to department policy, would be auctioned off to the highest bidder. That single thread, the only lifeline holding Lily's voice, her heart, and her hope together, was about to be cut. And no one knew if she could survive losing him too. The email came on a cold Tuesday morning. Thao Tran was sipping coffee in her quiet kitchen when the message popped up. A short, impersonal notice from the Weld County Sheriff's Department. Shadow, K-9 Unit number 9472, would be officially retired and placed for public auction at the upcoming Fallen Officers Benefit event. Just like that, without warning, the last living connection to her late husband was being stripped away, sold to the highest bidder under a policy designed to reduce liability and raise department funds. Her hands trembled as she set the mug down. Across the room, her husband Richard pretended not to notice. "They've always owned the dog," he said calmly, eyes never leaving his newspaper. "It's just policy." But Tao could barely breathe. Policy didn't see what Shadow meant to her daughter. Policy didn't sit in the hallway outside Lily's door, listening to the soft hum of a child's voice long thought lost. And Policy certainly didn't care that the same dog had been by her husband's side the day he gave his life. She knew the odds were against them. Shadow was a trained police dog, valued at over $12,000. Wealthy buyers had already taken an interest, none more persistent than Bui Khan Dewey, a powerful businessman with a polished smile and eyes that missed nothing. Officially, he wanted Shadow for his private security firm. Unofficially, Tao suspected darker motives. Something about his sudden interest in this specific dog didn't sit right. Her daughter's entire recovery, however fragile, depended on this animal. But what chance did a grieving widow and a silent child have against men who saw Shadow as a tool, a trophy, or worse, a threat to be neutralized? Thao didn't cry. Not at first. Instead, she opened her laptop and launched a GoFundMe page. She titled it, "Help Lily Keep Her Father's Legacy." She uploaded a photo of Lily and Shadow, her daughter's small face pressed into the shepherd's fur, a quiet bond deeper than words. "I don't care what it takes," she whispered, her voice cracking. "That dog is coming home." As she clicked publish, she knew this wouldn't be a fair fight. It was heart against money, grief against bureaucracy. But she wasn't just fighting for a dog, she was fighting for her daughter's soul. By the time the GoFundMe campaign had been live for a week, word of Lily Tran's story had spread far beyond the quiet streets of Weld County. What began as a desperate mother's plea became a community reckoning, a test of compassion, of conscience, and of what truly mattered in a world that too often hid behind rules. People who had never met the Trans found themselves unable to look away from the image. A solemn little girl clutching a pink piggy bank, sitting beside a weary German shepherd with graying fur and soulful eyes. The caption beneath read, "He's all she has left of her father." Donations trickled in at first, $5 here, $10 there. But it wasn't the money that caught attention. It was the silence, Lily's silence. The kind that doesn't come from shyness, but from a grief so deep, it steals your voice. The Weld County Tribune ran a Sunday feature, "Child of Fallen Officer Fights to Save Canine Companion," placing Lily and Shadow on the front page. Local news stations followed, airing clips of Lily during her weekly visits. No words, just a girl whispering into the fur of a dog who seemed to understand everything she couldn't say aloud. Soon, school children emptied their piggy banks, inspired by the idea that pennies could matter. Churches passed special donation plates. Businesses posted flyers. Weld Elementary held a penny drive for Lily, raising over $300 in spare change alone. The story touched people not just because it was sad, but because it was true. In Lily's quiet pain, they saw echoes of their own losses. In Shadow's unwavering loyalty, they recognized the kind of bond that policies could never account for. But not everyone was moved. Powerful bidders, especially Dewey, watched the growing support with suspicion. Behind the scenes, quiet opposition mounted. Promises were whispered into the ears of potential donors. Doubts were seeded about whether a traumatized child could truly handle a retired police dog. Still, the community pushed forward. For the first time in 5 years, Lily wasn't just seen. She was heard, even without speaking. Her fight wasn't just about a dog. It was about memory, healing, and the hope that sometimes, just sometimes, a small voice and a tired old dog could awaken something greater than rules: humanity. Just 10 days before the auction, when hope was wearing thin and the family's GoFundMe had plateaued well below what they needed, a surprising name began to circulate. Samuel Wells, a reclusive farmer from the northern edge of Weld County. Known mostly for his vast landholdings and his reluctance to attend public events, Wells had never been one to get involved in local drama. So when word spread that he had toured the K9 facility and spent nearly an hour observing Shadow, the community buzzed with speculation. Why would a wealthy landowner care about a retired police dog? Tran didn't know either, but she agreed to meet him when his assistant called with a request for a private conversation. They met at the county library in a reserved conference room with no distractions. Neutral ground. Wells arrived precisely on time, wearing a flannel shirt tucked neatly into worn jeans, his weathered hands still marked with the calluses of a man who worked his own land. He didn't offer small talk. "Mrs. Tran," he said, his voice gravely but calm, "I hear you're trying to keep your husband's canine partner for your daughter. I'd like to know why it matters so much." Thao had prepared arguments about therapy, trauma recovery, about the emotional cost of separation. But something in Wells's steady gaze told her this man wasn't asking for statistics. So she spoke from the heart. "Shadow is the only one my daughter talks to. He was there the day her father died. He's not just a dog, he's a lifeline." Wells listened in silence, then gave a slow nod. "My daughter Sarah," he said, pulling a worn photo from his wallet, "would have been 35 this year. Died in a car accident 5 years ago, same month as your husband." He paused, letting the weight of that memory settle in the space between them. The photo showed a laughing teenage girl cradling a young German Shepherd puppy. "I bought her that pup for her 16th birthday," he continued quietly. "It never got the chance to meet her." When he left, he didn't promise anything. But that night, Samuel Wells sat in his study, staring at that same photograph, a checkbook open on his desk. With slow, deliberate strokes, he wrote a number that would change everything. Not out of charity, not for recognition, but because he, too, understood what it meant to lose someone and to want one last piece of them to stay. The auction hall was packed, shoulder to shoulder, buzzing with tension. News cameras flanked the walls, reporters whispering behind lenses, capturing every second. On stage, Shadow sat alert, his ears perked, trained to perfection even in retirement. The auctioneer's voice sliced through the murmuring crowd. "Opening bid at $2,500 for K9 Shadow. Do I hear $2,500? Thao Tran raised her paddle immediately. So did others. The bidding climbed fast. $3,000, $4,000, $6,000. Across the aisle, Buikan Dui remained composed, his tailored suit unwrinkled, his expression unreadable. When he calmly placed a $12,500 bid, the room grew tense. Thao's heart sank. They were already beyond their limit. Her hand wavered, but she didn't raise the paddle again. Not yet. Then, from the back of the room, a voice rang out, firm and steady. 15,000. All heads turned toward Samuel Wells, standing tall and resolute. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dewey countered almost immediately, $20,000. Wells didn't flinch, $25,000. Dewey pushed again, $30,000. The numbers soared until Wells called, without hesitation, 60,000. Gasps filled the air. The auctioneer paused, stunned. 60,000 going once. Before he could continue, a soft whine from the stage interrupted the room's rhythm. Shadow's gaze had locked onto someone. Lily, sitting in the front row, clutching her piggy bank with trembling hands. In a heartbeat, she stood, slipped from her mother's grasp, and walked into the aisle, facing the dog. With a shaking hand, she lifted the police badge around her neck, her father's. The hall fell silent. No cameras clicked. No one breathed. Then came the miracle. Lily spoke. Her voice, hoarse from disuse, barely carried. "Wait for command," she whispered, words her father had once used with Shadow countless times. The dog's ears twitched. His posture changed. He recognized her, not just as David Tran's daughter, but as someone he was meant to protect. "I need him," Lily said louder, looking straight at the auctioneer. "He's not just a dog. He's the only one who listens. He keeps my daddy alive." The room froze in awe. A child who hadn't spoken in 5 years had just shattered the silence with truth so raw it cut through every rule, every dollar sign, and every heart. The celebration after the auction was brief, almost too brief. Though the crowd had erupted in applause when Shadow's leash was officially handed to Lily, a shadow lingered over the joy. Thao Tran could feel it. It wasn't just the policy hurdles still ahead, it was something darker. And she was right. 2 days later, a knock came at the Tran family's door. Samuel Wells stood there, his usual calm replaced by something grim. He carried a folder, thick with documents. "You need to see this," he said, stepping inside without ceremony. At the kitchen table, Wells laid out a series of files, photographs, and contracts. At the top was a name they all recognized, Meridian Pharmaceuticals, a company that had once been under investigation by David Tran himself, just weeks before his death. The investigator? David. The trained K9 assisting him? Shadow. The target? A suspected illegal chemical compound being developed under the guise of medical research. And now the firm had recently awarded a lucrative security contract to none other than Buikan Dewey. This isn't about a dog, Wells said coldly. It's about silencing evidence. Thao felt her stomach drop. Wells continued. David's case was shelved after his death. Too many pieces went missing. But Shadow, he was trained to detect the compound. That dog doesn't just represent memory. He represents risk. The realization hit like a freight train. Dewey hadn't been bidding out of sentiment, prestige, or even greed. He needed Shadow gone, out of the public's hands and out of reach from any future investigation. And Wells? His daughter, Sarah, had worked for Meridian before her mysterious car accident, the same month David died. She had raised concerns internally about unethical practices. 2 weeks later, she was gone. They called it an accident, Wells said quietly, but I never believed it. Thao's hands shook as she picked up one of the documents. Her husband had died trying to uncover something far bigger than anyone knew. And now, the dog that held the key had almost been erased. Sold, buried in bureaucracy, silenced forever. It wasn't just about bringing Shadow home anymore. It was about finishing what David started. And now, they had a chance to expose the truth. The committee room was heavy with tension, a courtroom in everything but name. County officials, legal advisors, and department representatives sat stiffly around a long table, flanked by reporters and observers who whispered nervously behind notepads. At the far end, Lily Tran sat quietly beside her mother, clutching Shadow's leash in one hand, her father's badge in the other. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was a statement. The sheriff's department reiterated its concerns: policy, liability, precedent. A child cannot serve as the handler for a retired police K9, one administrator insisted. This is about public safety, not sentiment. Then, Buikan Dewey rose from his seat, sharp suit immaculate, tone carefully measured. He offered an alternative placement for Shadow, his private security firm, with professional handlers, continued access for Lily, and full departmental oversight. It was polished. It was legal. It was, as Thao Tran knew, a lie. But Samuel Wells had come prepared. His attorney stood, cool and methodical, presenting evidence of Meridian Pharmaceuticals' buried investigation, one David Tran had been leading before his death. Shadow's training, the very reason Dewey wanted him, was built on identifying the specific chemical compounds involved in that case. The real reason for Dewey's interest was no longer speculation. It was fact. The committee was stunned. Then, the unexpected happened. Richard, Lily's stepfather, once skeptical, once a silent bystander, stood and asked to speak. I tried to make this about moving on, he said, voice tight with emotion. But my stepdaughter doesn't need to forget. She needs to heal. And Shadow is how she's doing it. His confession struck a chord. After a hushed deliberation, the commissioner returned with the ruling. Shadow would stay with the Tran family under specialized supervision. An exception to policy, made not out of pity, but out of justice. The truth mattered, the bond mattered, and for once, the system had listened. As Lily stepped outside into the sun, still holding the leash, reporters called out, but she ignored them. Instead, she knelt beside Shadow, whispered something in his ear, and then stood tall. "We're going home now," she said, her voice clear, steady, strong. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't just surviving, she was leading. In the end, Lily's journey wasn't just about reclaiming a dog. It was about reclaiming her voice, her strength, and her connection to a father she lost too soon. Shadow was never just a retired K9. He was a keeper of memories, a guardian of innocence, and proof that healing sometimes comes not through words, but through presence, through loyalty, love, and quiet understanding. This story reminds us that animals are not tools to be used and discarded. They are sentient beings with emotions, bonds, and purpose. Shadow didn't just protect Lily physically, he gave her a reason to fight, to speak, to hope. Through him, a broken child found the courage to face the world again. It took a village, a grieving mother, a guilt-ridden stepfather, a silent little girl, and even a quiet old farmer carrying grief of his own to stand up against the coldness of policy and the weight of power. Together, they proved that love, when unwavering, can bend even the hardest of rules. The lesson is clear. When we treat animals with compassion and respect, we not only honor them, we honor the humanity within ourselves. Every rescued dog, every retired service animal, every creature given a second chance carries within them the power to heal, to connect, and to change lives. Let Lily and Shadow's story be a reminder to us all of the unspoken bonds that run deeper than language and the lives that wait silently, patiently to be seen and valued. If you've ever loved an animal or been saved by one in your darkest hour, then you know they are not just animals. They are family, and they deserve our love, our protection, and our voice, just as they have given us theirs.